In this video, guys, we're going to have a look at doing some mono to stereo magic. So we're going to take a boring acoustic guitar sound like this. And turn it into something like this. So we're going to do a little bit of mono to stereo magic. So let me break this down for you. I recorded this acoustic guitar with my TLM 103 and I was just doing a quick little promo video for a song that I released recently. This isn't a plug for that, but if you want to check it out, I'll put a link to it in the description below. Now let's run through the processing of how we're going to get from here to here. Now, it's a little bit more than just reverb going on here. So I know you're probably just like, oh, it's just reverb, but there is a lot of reverb, but there is a couple of other things going on at the same time to get that nice sense of space and depth. First of all, we've just got a little bit of EQ on here. So all I'm doing here is cleaning up the guitar tone a little bit. So just taking out a little bit of like a drony frequency in the mid-range here. So 838 hertz there, just pull that down a bit. So about -5 dBs there with a really tight bell. And that's about it on the EQ. Tiny touch of compression. We're just doing like a 0.16 release, so fairly fast. 3:1 ratio. And you can see down here how much compression we have going on. Basically nothing. So there's not really much compression going on at all. You can see the performance is like fairly even. I kind of want to keep it sounding nice and natural anyway without being too compressed. Compression on acoustic guitar generally doesn't sound that great to me anyway, so that's just there in case a little something gets ahead of itself. And we could add a little bit of a high pass filter here, so we might just put this up to around 80 hertz. Now the next one you have in the chain is Pro MB, so we're just doing this for a little bit of control over the low end. There's a little bit of like boomy low end because it's finger picked, so on some chords the bass was coming through a little bit heavier, so this is just to rein that in a little bit. Really controlling that low end and keeping those notes nice and even. And we've got a high shelf up here for anything that gets a little scratchy. Mostly like in the very intro, there's like a fingernail strum. And that just takes away a little bit of the harshness off that big strum at the beginning. And for both of these, they're on a fast attack, fast release. And I've just played with the threshold until it's reacting the way that I wanted it to. So what I've done here is I've duplicated the track. So initially I started out with everything on the no effects track and I added everything down and I had the reverb on here, but then I decided it actually sounds nicer and gives me a little bit more control to then just duplicate the track and put the reverb on 100% wet, and then I can blend it in how I want as opposed to trying to blend it on the track and have a little bit less control over the actual effect send here. So you could just make an effect send off of this, but you can also do something like this where you just duplicate your track and then make this an effects track and you blend it in with your dry track. So the first thing that we've got here is a little bit of micro shift. So we've gone mono to stereo and now we can add a little bit of chorus to the guitar. I used to hate chorus. I associated it with 80s, 90s metal sound. Like every time I heard a clean electric guitar with a bit of chorus on, I just wanted to turn the song off. But I've grown to really appreciate chorus and love it a lot now, actually. So micro shift is a pretty interesting effect here, and it kind of splits the sound over the stereo field and it gets a little chorusy, phasey sounding. So have a listen to this. We've got it on a 38% mix here. I love that. I think that's so cool. So already we've just opened the sound up, spreading it across the stereo field, and we're getting an interesting effect happening. Now the next thing we've added is Soundtoys Echo Boy. So a little bit of delay, nothing crazy going on here, just a tempo sync, a little bit of feedback, rolling off some low end, rolling off a touch of high end, and we've got it on space echo. So a little bit more chorusy, a little bit of modulation in a sound creates a lot of depth and dimension to it. So that's why all of these sounds that I'm using at the moment, they have a little bit of a pitch shifting effect happening at the same time, and that creates way more depth than just if it was a straight echo or a straight reverb sound. Having that little waver in pitch actually just creates this really nice sense of depth. So we're only using about 16% here. That sounds pretty nice. Now the next thing in the chain is actually a little bit of EQ, but I'm pretty sure when I put this on, I did it after I did the reverb. So let's have a look at the reverb, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to EQ before the reverb. So we're going to skip over this next one and go to Valhalla Vintage Verb. So this is where a lot of the magic is happening. So we're going to combine our micro shift, our delay with Echo Boy into Valhalla, and this is where it's going to start to sound really cool. So we've got the mix at 100% here, but let's dial it back so we can hear what it sounds like at maybe like 50%, get a vibe for what we're chasing, and then we'll send this to 100% wet so that we can later blend it with our dry signal. We've got it on the concert hall, which is pretty much just the startup settings, just a really great sound, nice and smooth, and color 1980s. The 1970s sounded really good on this too. I'll show you what that sounds like, but the 1980s worked really well for this. I haven't tweaked many settings in this at all. I've mostly just gone for the low cut, and we're taking it up to 510 hertz and taking the high cut to 5280 hertz. So taking away a lot of the low end and taking away a lot of that ultra high end. So we're getting a little bit more of a smoother reverb sound here. Sounds pretty lush. A lot of the magic's happening right here, and this reverb is just incredible. You can't go wrong if you go and buy Valhalla Vintage Verb. It's got so many great options. The now setting's a bit more modern and clean sounding, and then the 1970s, 80s colors have a lot of modulation and color to it. And then there's all these presets and yeah, all these modes. It's crazy. It's so good. You definitely need it in your reverb repertoire. Have a quick listen to what the 1970s mode sounds like. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit richer, but I like what the 1980s is doing to this, and especially once we have our beat and our bass in there. I mean, I'm definitely questioning myself right now because these both sound so good. It's really hard to decide which one sounds better. But let's stick with our 1980s for now, just because we're loving the chorus sound. But that's our reverb sound. So we've got it on 100% mix again. Now let's go back and open up Pro Q3, and we're going to have a look at our EQ here before the reverb. Mostly trying to deal with a little bit of like mid-rangey build up and just anything that's sort of like making the reverb sound a bit gross. Cutting it at 1.9K here, about minus 3.4 dBs, and a cut at 800 hertz, around 3 dBs as well, and then like a 1 dB cut at 200 hertz. So kind of a little bit of low end build up in the guitar around 200 hertz, and then a bit of muddiness, honkiness in the guitar and these mids here. And by cleaning that up, we make a little bit of space for the dry signal as well. It's pretty subtle, but it is cleaning up that reverb a little bit more by cutting some of this mid-range junk out. Now, the next thing we're going to do to add just a tiny bit more depth to the sound is we're going to add a teeny bit of stereo width. So I'm using the Waves S1 imager, and we're just boosting this up a little bit. So yeah, something like that, just pushing it up a touch. You could go crazy with it, but let's just do a little bit so it doesn't completely fall apart. Now, the last thing we have here is just a tiny bit more EQ. So this EQ is just at the very end of the chain, just to deal with any frequencies that were annoying me once everything was in the mix. And I found something at around 300 hertz, 296 hertz. I'm just doing a bit of a cut here. Just like this woofiness that was just sort of blurring the sound a lot. And then some of this like sparkly high presence around 4K. Just a little cut there just to like warm it up a bit again. Okay, now let's have a listen to what this sounds like blended in with that boring, dry mono sound. It just takes you to another place. So listening to that dry sound, like it's a nice acoustic part, but it just doesn't really do anything for you. But having these effects and just that sense of space, it's so much deeper, and there's a much deeper connection to the music and draws the listener in way more. And this could work really well on an electric guitar, even on like a piano part, any kind of mono sound that needs a little bit of life. This could work really cool to create a nice ambient sense of space. And you can just use it as a bit of a pad sound even if you like the dry sound and you didn't want it to be too dramatic, you just blend it in. But for me, I love it with the effect on this guitar turned right up, just engulfing it and just adding that huge sense of space. And something as simple as adding like a bit of a loop or just some basic 808 synth bass just to thicken up that low end. You've got a great start to building a song with a couple of elements there. And a fun fact, this little groove that's going on in the background here is made up from some samples that I released the other day. So the ones that are in my one-shot pack, Cymbal Essentials, and my Shaker and Tambo Loops pack. I'm using all of those elements in this track just to create a nice little groove here that sounds like this. Just dragged and dropped these in, and then just programmed it out with the MIDI. It's pretty cool. And all of those sounds are included in those packs that I just mentioned. Check the description below. You'll find some links to where you can purchase these drum samples. And if you're keen to check out the song that this guitar part's from, there's a link there as well. I'll just quickly show you this because I find this really exciting. So in my Shaker and Tambourine loops pack, this is what you can find in it. Just a ton of loops here, like every BPM, not every BPM, but a wide variety and enough to work with in pretty much any situation really, that you can just drag and drop into any track. So this shaker here, I just dragged and dropped it into the session. It's 4.5 bars. Just drag back the little half bar at the end and then you loop it to where you want it to go to and then convert loops to regions. And then you can drag it forward to create a nice little crossfade so you don't get any glitches. Done. You don't have to record a shaker. You don't have to time stretch anything. Away you go. Just want to share that with you guys, and just want to say thanks to everyone who has purchased the sample pack already. Had a really great response to it so far, and I hope that you guys are having a lot of fun using these in your productions. And one more time, our dry, boring acoustic sound. The effects we created for it. Sounds so good. And then the groove. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go forth, create beautiful, lush electric and acoustic guitars or any boring mono source that you want to create some stereo magic with. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're always looking for new drum samples, then check out this next video where I take you through the pack I just made specifically for Trigger 2.